It all began with a single envelope, a white, unmarked slip tucked beneath the doormat of my quiet, sun-soaked home. At first glance, it looked harmless, a simple HOA membership invitation, like the dozens of others I had received since buying this property 5 years ago. But what I didn't know was that this envelope would spark a chain of events so twisted, so vindictive, that it would end with my home reduced to smoldering ashes and my neighbors, my so-called community, standing in open-mouthed shock as the people behind it all faced the full weight of the law I had once written myself. The story starts in the idyllic suburb of Eastwood Bluffs. Picture it. Neat lawns stretching endlessly, mailboxes polished until they gleamed in the morning sun, houses standing shoulder to shoulder like soldiers in perfectly aligned rows. It was the kind of place real estate brochures called peaceful, family-oriented, safe. What they didn't print in those brochures was the existence of the Eastwood Bluffs Homeowners Association, a group with more power than the local sheriff and an obsession with control so fierce it bordered on madness. I had moved here to escape noise, drama, and chaos. What I didn't realize was that Eastwood Bluffs was chaos, just dressed in white fences and trimmed hedges. And at the center of it all was the HOA president, a woman everyone called Karen, though that wasn't her real name. She was the type who never smiled without malice lurking behind her eyes, the kind who could turn a bake sale into a battlefield. Her word was law here, or so she thought. When I bought my house, I made one thing crystal clear. I had no intention of joining the HOA. My property deed allowed me to opt out, and I had the legal right to do so. That alone was enough to make Karen furious. From day one, she sent letters threatening fines, citing imaginary regulations, demanding compliance with rules that didn't apply to me. And with each letter, her tone grew harsher, dripping with passive-aggressive fury. I ignored them all. But here's what Karen and her little army didn't know. Before retiring, I had spent 25 years as a property rights attorney. Not only did I understand every legal loophole in the book, but I had also personally written large portions of the state's property code. I knew exactly what HOAs could and couldn't do. And I knew, beyond any doubt, that I was untouchable. For a while, my silence drove them insane. They couldn't find me. They couldn't force me to mow my lawn to their exact length specifications. They couldn't demand I paint my house beige instead of the deep forest green the first loved. They had no legal foothold, and they hated me for it. Then came the warnings. One evening, I found a note taped to my front door. It read, "Join the HOA, or things might get difficult." No name, no signature, just those words, written in shaky, angry handwriting. I laughed it off at first. HOA threats were nothing new. I had seen them all in my career. But this time, there was a different edge to it. A feeling in my gut told me this wasn't just bluster. Weeks passed and the tension escalated. My security cameras caught neighbors whispering at the edge of my property line. I found tire tracks in my yard one morning, as if someone had driven across it on purpose. A brick was thrown through my mailbox late one night, though no one admitted to seeing anything. Still, I refused to give in. That's when they crossed the line from petty harassment to full-blown criminality. It happened on a Friday night. I was out of town for a legal seminar. Ironic, I know. When my phone rang at 2 a.m., a neighbor's frantic voice told me there had been a fire. My house. Flames visible from blocks away. By the time I raced back the next morning, all that remained was a blackened skeleton of wood and ash. The fire chief pulled me aside. The cause, he said, was suspicious. There were signs of accelerants. This wasn't an accident. I didn't need to guess who was behind it. The HOA had finally made their move. But here's where their arrogance became their downfall. In torching my house, they hadn't just committed arson. They had violated a list of state and federal laws so long it would take a courtroom weeks to unpack. And the best part? I knew those laws inside and out because I had helped write them. As I stood there staring at the ruins, something inside me shifted. The grief and shock hardened into something sharper, colder. This wasn't just about a burned house anymore. This was war. And I was going to make sure every single person involved in this little HOA empire learned exactly what it meant to cross someone who had built the very laws they had just broken. But first, I needed proof. And I had a plan that would unravel everything Karen and her cronies thought they controlled. Because if they wanted to fight, I was about to bring them one they would never forget. They thought burning my house would end it. Instead, they had just signed the death certificate for their entire empire. Asterisk. You don't burn the home of a man who wrote the laws you're about to be buried under. Asterisk. The fire was only the beginning. The real destruction was about to come from me. The ashes of my home were still smoldering when I started gathering evidence. The HOA thought they had silenced me with fire and smoke, but all they had done was ignite something far worse. A legal storm that was about to rip through their perfect little neighborhood. I didn't return to the ruins in grief. No, I came back like a hunter, walking through blackened rubble with eyes sharp as knives, already thinking 3 steps ahead. Every scrap of charred wood, every scorched mailbox post, it was all a clue, and I was going to piece together exactly how this HOA turned from petty bullies into criminals. The fire chief's report confirmed what I already suspected. Accelerants, multiple ignition points, and timing that screamed of a planned attack. Someone had wanted this fire. Someone had made it happen. And in Eastwood Bluffs, there was only one group with motive, power, and a grudge big enough to try it. The HOA led by Karen herself. But the beauty of what came next was this. They didn't realize who they were dealing with. While the ashes cooled, I began to dig, not into the debris, but into the HOA itself. My years as a property rights attorney had given me access to records most people didn't even know existed. I pulled everything. Financial statements, meeting minutes, election records, property liens. I knew the laws better than they did, and I knew exactly where to look for cracks. And cracks began to appear everywhere. The first discovery? A suspicious transfer of HOA funds. Tens of thousands of dollars disappearing into maintenance projects that never existed. Then came reports of intimidation tactics against other homeowners. Fines for rules the HOA didn't legally have the power to enforce. Threats to tow cars parked on private driveways. Demands for repainting houses that weren't even under HOA jurisdiction. But the most damning evidence was buried deep in property tax records. The president herself, Karen, had been funneling HOA money into land she secretly owned right outside Eastwood Bluffs. She had been using HOA funds to improve her own property while threatening homeowners for tiny violations like mailbox colors. The deeper I dug, the clearer the picture became. This wasn't just a power-hungry HOA. This was a personal empire, run by Karen and a few loyal board members, hiding behind the illusion of community improvement while lining their own pockets. And now, with arson on top of all, they had crossed into territory so illegal, so catastrophic, that even their high-priced attorneys wouldn't be able to save them. But here's what made it all deliciously ironic. I didn't have to invent a single weapon to use against them. I had written half the property and HOA regulations in the state myself, years ago, as part of a legal team tasked with cracking down on exactly this kind of abuse. Karen and her cronies had been violating laws I had helped design. It was like watching someone step into a trap you built with your own hands. Still, I needed hard proof of the arson itself. That was the key. The missing piece that would turn this from a civil matter into a criminal case. So, I hired a private investigator. Someone quiet. Someone thorough. Within days, he uncovered security footage from a gas station near Eastwood Bluffs. A black SUV filling multiple containers with gasoline just hours before the fire. The license plate? Registered to one of the HOA board members. The moment I saw that footage, I knew it was over for them. But I wasn't ready to call the police. Not yet. No, I had something far bigger in mind. If I played this right, I could take down the entire HOA system in Eastwood Bluffs, expose every dirty secret, every illegal transaction, every abuse of power, and do it in a way that would leave them humiliated, bankrupt, and possibly behind bars. The fire had destroyed my house. But now, I was about to burn down their entire empire, legally. They burned my house to silence me, but I turned their empire into ashes, legally, brutally, and for the whole world to see. They thought they ended me with fire. Instead, they gave me the matches to burn down everything they'd built. This wasn't revenge anymore. This was justice, wrapped in the very laws they thought they controlled. By the time I was done, the HOA wouldn't just lose power. It would never exist again. The final phase of my plan began quietly, like the calm before a hurricane. For weeks, the HOA continued as if nothing had happened, issuing threats, collecting dues, holding their smug little meetings in the clubhouse they built with stolen funds. They didn't know that every step they took was being watched, documented, prepared to be unleashed like a tidal wave. I had everything now. The investigators' footage of the gas station, the financial records proving embezzlement, the property tax documents showing Karen's secret land grabs, even anonymous statements from homeowners who had been bullied, fined, and threatened for years. Piece by piece, I constructed a case so airtight that when it exploded, there would be no escape for anyone involved. But I didn't want this to be quiet justice behind closed courtroom doors. No, I wanted the entire neighborhood, no, the entire world, to see the HOA's empire collapse in broad daylight. So I planned to reveal with precision. First, I sent a copy of all the financial records to the state auditor's office. Then the arson evidence went straight to the district attorney, along with a full report tying the HOA board members to the crime. But the real masterpiece? That came when I contacted a local investigative journalist, known for exposing corruption. I handed her everything. Every document, every photo, every recording. And I asked her for one thing: make it public. Within a week, the story exploded across local news. HOA corruption scandal. Board members under investigation for arson, embezzlement, and abuse of power. The footage of the board members' SUV buying gasoline the night of the fire played on every channel. The financial records showed tens of thousands of dollars missing. The interviews with bullied homeowners painted a picture of an HOA that had ruled through fear for years. And at the center of it all was Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of Eastwood Bluffs, exposed as the architect of the entire empire of greed and control. The neighborhood that once obeyed her every command turned on her overnight. Homeowners demanded her resignation. Some called for her arrest. Others admitted they had stayed silent for years out of fear of retaliation. But fear was gone now, because the law was coming. The district attorney filed charges within days: arson, conspiracy, fraud, and multiple counts of financial misconduct. The state froze HOA bank accounts pending investigation. Board members received subpoenas. Karen herself was photographed leaving her house in tears as news crews swarmed her driveway. It was everything they deserved and more. But I wasn't finished yet, because I knew something most people didn't. Under state law, an HOA involved in criminal activity could be dissolved entirely if enough homeowners voted for it. And with the entire board disgraced, angry residents lined up to sign a petition I drafted. 2 months after the fire that destroyed my home, Eastwood Bluffs HOA ceased to exist. Its rules, its fines, its ridiculous power over homeowners, all of it vanished overnight. The clubhouse? Sold. The HOA bank account? Seized. Karen's empire? Reduced to rubble, just like my house had been. But here's the final twist. The land Karen secretly bought with HOA money? The state forced her to sell it to repay damages. She lost everything. And me? I rebuilt my house, bigger and better than before, right on the same spot where the old one had burned. No HOA. No board meetings. No letters demanding lawn measurements or mailbox colors. Just freedom. The kind of freedom the HOA had tried to crush under threats and fear. As I stood on my new porch months later, watching moving trucks haul away the last of Karen's furniture after the bank repossessed her home, I felt no anger left. Just closure. They had burned my house to the ground. But in the end, I burned down their entire empire, without striking a single match. If you think this story was wild, wait until you hear what happened in the next neighborhood over. Hit that subscribe button right now, because HOA dramas like this, they're just getting started.